Right, well, hello again, everyone, and welcome back from the room change. Very excited to be interviewing Matt Macri-Waller as our next slot. So I've moved a little closer. We've given Matt a karaoke mic.
Yeah,
just
I'm going to sing in a minute.
And we're going to talk about recognition, feedback, and engagement. Now, just in case you've forgotten how to use Slido during the room break, we're going to start off with a poll question, which hopefully is going to appear on the screen any second now.
As if by magic.
Oh, just go out and talk amongst yourselves. We'll be right there. There you go. Nice, simple one. Do you currently measure engagement? Well, that's looking really good. So I think that's beginning to tell it like it is there. What's your response to that, Mac?
It's probably about, well, there's 70 people voting, so there's probably 70 different variations of how engagement's probably measured. But I guess healthy to see. I guess if you wind that back a couple of years, I would have said a lot of the market wasn't really thinking about engagement in that context. And I think for anyone who's seen, it's been a bit of a hobby horse of mine to kind of get on about engagement and how we might measure it. But I think that I think as an industry, it's probably a massively overused term. I think that I've sat in presentations from system and platform providers, including the one that I kind of had to end the meeting was it was a leave in absence platform, and the guy who was presenting, bless him, was trying to convince me that people booking the fact that they'd been off sick was an engaging thing. And at that point, I guess I kind of felt it was probably a little bit overused. But I guess I like it. I think I like the fact that everyone's trying to track it. But I think it's a big challenge for us as a market. And I think we often get asked about how you kind of rank and score engagement, and I've seen all different variations within that. So people's default seems to be rush to feedback, which we all know can be full of bias. And so I think a lot of the market has moved from annual feedback to increase the cadence of that. So I'm going to ask you quarterly or monthly or real time. But unless you shift the whole organization to become a listening organization and actually make some changes off the back of that, you pretty much end up in the same place. I've also seen some really creepy ones, which is, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of, hopefully there's no one from this business in here, a business called Volumetrics, which got bought by Microsoft. But what Volumetrics were doing was they were taking the data and content of your emails and the content of the meetings you'd had and who they were with to work out who was engaged. So they were looking at the sentiment in your actual emails, and then they were also looking at who am I actually connected with in the organization, because there's a lot of data that says actually the more connected you are in your organization, the wider your kind of social network is, typically the more engaged you are. So they came up with some really interesting stuff. I'm still not quite sure how aware employees were of that, but yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's a term I've seen more than once, creepy HR, which is kind of slightly worrying.
We can all get a bit of that.
And I guess the thing with feedback, as you say, generally, or any kind of measurement, any kind of metrics, is it's not necessarily what you've got, but it's what you do with it. Do you feel that, in general, people you talk to have got enough of an idea what they're going to do with it before they get into the the measuring of it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think where we've seen a lot of organizations struggle is that the technology's been able for a long time to ask you, whatever you want at whatever frequency. And, there's a reason that, $100 million of investment has gone into feedback platforms, and there are a plethora of them. I'm sure some of you use them, but, Culture Amp, Culture IQ, Peakon, TinyPulse, the list goes on. I think the issue for a lot of organizations, certainly that we've seen, is that the intent is there to get the feedback, but pretty much every organization we've seen works on an investment cycle that's annual, a budgeting cycle that's annual, and a kind of strategic and target cycle that's annual. And until that shift happens, I think gathering feedback other than perhaps about topical things or sometimes fairly frivolous things can be a little bit more challenging.
Sure.
Not a reason not to do it. But.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, if you haven't worked it out by now, I can ask questions for England, but this isn't about me, so do make sure you're putting plenty of questions through into Slido for us. So is there another way then?
That is a good question. I think for us, as I said, we've really pushed hard to try and get to a place where we can understand how you might measure and score engagement across a raft of different bits of data. But I think the interesting thing is that I think often within that you can sometimes forget the basics. And I think that we heard it said earlier on in the panel, I think it was Paul mentioning it earlier, just for me, what we seem to forget is that these people are customers of other businesses, but they're also a customer of our business. And so when we look at employees, I think we just sometimes really forget that overall experience. And I think we would do very well to focus on, we talk about engagement loops in our business, but we would do much better, I think, to focus on those bits of experience that people are kind of where there's points of friction. And if I give you an example, there's a client working with us at the moment where they have a phenomenal recruitment process. You know, they bring in some absolutely amazing people from all different sources. But if you were on a 3-month or a 1-month notice period, you kind of have this period of abandonment where you're kind of forgotten until you arrive. And then when you arrive, there's just a series of kind of friction and frustration points. And so for them, you know, for me, a much better experience would be actually, what about in, you know, you've accepted your offer. What about in day then, you know, 0 to 15? We see that as kind of, although you're not physically here, you're with us. And so why don't you take somebody through an engagement loop that says, actually, here's what we're about, here's what the culture is about, here's the team you're going to work with, you know, here's a video from our CEO about vision and culture, and here's how you recognize someone off the back of that. And I think if we design those experiences really well, I think what you get as an outcome is engagement. And I think that I always hear lots about engagement platforms, and we've been guilty of using the term ourselves, I think, but I think we could do really well just to focus back on that experience piece. And really, if you design great experiences, I think you'll get engagement as an outcome.
Sure. And how does that apply to sort of internal job changes as well? Because I think sometimes when people change organisation, there's a great, hey, welcome new person. But when you get an internal job change, perhaps that same isn't applied, and it's difficult to do that handover process gradually.
Yeah, again, I think it just comes back to design, and I think you have to think purposely about, particularly if you're, you know, lots of the organisations in here will be growing, and so when you grow quickly, particularly, I think what often gets forgotten is, you know, everyone in the organisation can talk about the fact we're going to hire 400 heads, 500 heads, 1,000 people, whatever it might be, but lots of people forget that a number of those people who are currently with you may or may not make that transition into whatever the new organisation becomes, and it does accentuate when people move teams and those sorts of things. So I think really understanding, like I said, that experience piece of when somebody moves, how do they know now what's new, what's different, how this team works, it's all stuff you can design, you just need to think about it.
Sure. And I think one of the points that has come up several times today is that relationship between treating employees as you would treat your customers, or the relationship between those in terms of engagement. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts and experiences on that?
I think if we just take our industry, you know, average is 22% of payroll is spent on benefits, so excluding the fact that people are the remainder of that cost. I think, I don't know an organisation in the world that would spend 22% of payroll on a product and not think about the experience that goes in. And I think that there was a great article written by Josh Bersin, so you know, very great thought leader in the US, who talked very much about this kind of overwhelmed employee. And I think, you know, Jamie referenced it earlier, but I think for me, we are all in that situation. If I take any one of our clients, they have a benefit platform, they have potentially a discount platform, they have pensions and shares, and I've got a learning and development platform, and then I've got to get into Workday as well, and on and on and on it goes. And I'm struggling to work out when do I need to go and which one for what reason, and there's all this communication coming at me. Oh, and by the way, I've actually got to do my job at the same time. So I think, you know, as an industry, I think we've got to do a better job of making that easy from an employee perspective. And lots of talk earlier on about, you know, machine learning and AI and all those other kind of good things. But I think one of the best things that will come of it is this simplification of where I need to go to as an employee and what I need to think about when I'm there. And so to me, it should be, what the technology should be doing is making that experience simple and making it so that I don't have to think about, okay, today I need to do this in the kind of performance management system, or today I need to do that somewhere else.
Sure. So it's taking some of that headspace out of the equation. That's great. No, really interesting. Well, where have you seen that work well in practice?
I guess where I've seen it start to work well is really a case of, if you take, I try not to talk about us, that's really difficult, but if you take, I've seen a client apply it in a very specific instance, and that is that when they can effectively give people this one place to go to. So they've got one single place to land on, and when they land there, what it's doing is it gives you a series of tasks and a series of things you need to think about. And what that does over time is it learns. So effectively what it does is it starts by saying, okay, I understand the calendar in the year. So I know at these different points I need to do certain things, so it starts with that. Then it starts to take preferences. So similar to what Jamie showed you earlier on. It starts to take preferences. What are the things I'm interested in? What are the things I want to know about? How do I learn? How do I move forwards? And then what it starts to do is look at what you're actually doing and look at the content. And so effectively what you start to get is this really simplified single place to go to that really kind of makes all of that really simple and straightforward from an employee. So it's very difficult without disclosing clients and stuff to give you specific examples, but there is one client who does that very, very well, using a combination of our technology and some existing technology there.
Sure. And I think we've kind of neatly paved the way towards the first of the questions that we've got on the screen here, which is around what a best-in-class digital recognition system looks like and where's it going?
Sure. It's probably more a question for Jamie than me. But I think for us, what we've seen is there's a few trends moving in that area. So I think for me, recognition is all about instantaneous, very visible, and meaningful. And so I think that crucially what we've seen is that in the digital space, you can start to actually deliver on that promise historically. We've seen a lot of organizations shifting right away from having significant budgets to spend in that space, or moving away from perhaps historic kind of length of service awards and those kind of things. So I think for me, best-in-class digital recognition looks like it's instantaneous, it's across everybody, anyone can recognize anyone for anything, and then alongside that you'll run something across the whole organization that provides even more visibility to those top performers. To me then the secondary bit to that is how you connect that back to the performance piece and how you connect it back to being as part of the review, and so you have this kind of feed into whatever your performance management system is, or that becomes it.
Sure, so about that linkage as well. Now in the description for this session we promised people moments of truth.
Oh, okay.
So I want a moment of truth. Tell me what. Tell me about.
Seeing how smart everyone is, I'm regretting wearing trainers. There's a moment of truth for you. I guess when we talk about moments of truth, I think it is about, like I said, when you're designing those experiences, I think there are moments that really matter to people, and there are moments that just are things I have to do every day. And I think when you're thinking from an experience point of view, a lot of the work we do with clients is what are those moments where you really will have a huge impact as an organization. And so they can be, very big things like, you've had a bereavement or you've had something happen, that's very, very specific in your life, like you've had a child or whatever else. But you also have other kind of smaller moments that can be, a big deal to people. And recognition is a good example of that. I think, when you look at how badly it's done in a lot of organizations, how badly feedback's given, I think there's real opportunities to take some of those specific moments where your brand has the opportunity to shine through. So what is it you're about? What is it you stand for? And just drive that through the experience. And it's going to be different, therefore, for kind of everybody in the room. Mm-hmm.
Sure, that's right. Okay, that's great. I'd love to expand more on moments of truth, because I think they're great. But I'd also love to take the rather apposite, I think, top question on there, which is around best practice. How many questions and how often? Perhaps that's a question for me. I don't know how many questions.
I guess there is no real prescriptive, and I've seen lots of different models of kind of feedback and how often you should ask questions and what you should do. I think you need to ask at a cadence and a rhythm that you can react to, and I think that's the critical bit. If it's about mood and sentiment and you want to gather that, then you're gathering that every single day. Well, that's fine. You can do that quite straightforwardly, and you can try and understand sentiment in the organization. If it's about actionable feedback, if it's that we need a new toaster or a different coffee and those kind of things, well, that's simple. But if you're looking at really kind of strategic, big reasons why people kind of join you or leave, you need to better react. And so, I've seen organizations do it brilliantly weekly. I've seen organizations do it brilliantly quarterly. I've also seen people who do it very well still annually. So I think it really does depend.
Sure. And do you think that will change and evolve over time as systems change with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the days, if you just look at performance, at the end of the day, a lot of what we're trying to drive with engagement is performance. And the days of that kind of forced bell curve of where's everyone rank, I think are gone, because ideally you want everybody top right and pushing hard. And the trouble is, a lot of how you rank people and how you do pay review and all those kind of things is not really geared up for everyone being a high performer. So, yeah.
But we can hope. We can hope for high performers
absolutely.
across the board.
Definitely.
Regrettably, the clock has beaten us
okay,
again, Matt. I'm sorry, but thank you very much indeed.
Right.
That's been a really fantastic session. So,
thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Matt. Let's speak to you. See you later.